right, good afternoon, everyone. We are now back for our next agenda item. This special session portion of our meeting is reserved to discuss the results of an independent reconciliation of spending and revenues in the district's capital improvement program being completed by the professional services firm, Moss Adams. As a reminder to the board and our listening public, in May of 2023, the board charged Superintendent Dorland with initiating an independent reconciliation of the district's capital improvement program, revenues, commitments, expenditures, and reporting. The purpose of this engagement is to verify the financial state of CIP through April of 2023, to confirm the balance of remaining funds available to allocate to additional projects as of that date, and to identify any variances between contracted, paid, recorded, and reported costs. Before I hand this over to our guest, Superintendent Dorland, is there anything you would like to add?
I would like to thank our partners at Moss Adams, including Steve Bacchetti, who was nice enough to be here with us today. Am I saying your last name correctly? Yes. Bacchetti. Good for me. I know every time I say it, I'm hoping I'm saying it the right way. So thank you for being here. Thank you to your team for being with us remotely. And before we hand it over to Steve, I would like to highlight what I think are some of the values to the district that the work that Moss Adams has partnered with us on have provided for us. So number one, the work that we're about to discuss and the materials that Moss Adams has prepared with our team really does provide for us confidence in our current reporting. The careful fiscal reconciliation across three things: contract documents and change orders, construction management software system, and our general ledger revealed that we have accurately captured project level expenses and that we should feel comfort in our reporting. Number two, this work has helped us increase clarity on non-CIP spending. Moss Adams reconciliation included all spending across the Capital Reserve Fund and the two funds of bond dollars. It was not limited to the things we classify as the quote-unquote CIP or bond, and as such, it helped illuminate that the mini programs have proceeded over the past several years, and they consumed the starting fund balance in the Capital Reserve, as well as some other annual receipts into the Capital Reserve Fund. This helps us begin to plan for the post-CIP world, where we will have ongoing planned and unplanned capital expenses. Third, this work has been preparatory for us for a hypothetical IRS audit. The team ended up, thank you very much, scanning quite a bit of contract documentation into electronic documents that were previously only paper-based. And so this will help us be prepared and efficient should the IRS elect to audit our deployment of tax-exempt bond proceeds in the future. And number four, this work has really contributed to lessons learned as we close out the CIP. The reconciliation helped confirm that there are some challenges. I might take out the word some. There are challenges to a commingled bond proceeds versus Capital Reserve Fund dollar approach to our capital investments. In the future, the district will need to make very clear distinctions between any plans for Capital Reserve investments versus bond investments. This lesson will be combined with others that have been learned as new leadership embarks on a new capital planning process. So thank you very much for helping in all four of those categories. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. Bacchetti.
Is your just real quick, is your green light on? There you go.
Testing. Can you hear me? Okay, I think that was perfectly summarized. So I think that completes our presentation for. Just kidding. So it's great to finally meet you all in person. I think we've done this is our second major project with you all, so we're really happy to be face to face to kind of talk about our results. Before we get into the capital expenditure fiscal reconciliation report, which we're very excited about, I just kind of want to give a huge thank you to the Jeffco team. This was not an easy effort. When most people were taking summer vacations, summer tropical, our team was working with the Jeffco team, getting access to their folder system, understanding where documents were located, and doing many back and forth saying, hey, we're missing this, where's this? I think we went through, the total population was over 5,000 contracts. I think our team reviewed over 3,000, where we actually manually looked at contract documents, change orders, et cetera, to confirm that the commitment reporting within the system was accurate. So that was a huge task for both our team and the Jeffco team. At no point within our procedures were they not friendly, kind, proactively working with us. Sure, they were many times saying, "Hey, I got a daytime job on top of this," but they were always really easy to work with. So we really appreciate working with the whole team within the facilities department and getting all the support from Brenna and Tracy on this project. And then with that, I think we'll pop it up on screen. What I want to note that this is a final draft. We were getting kind of minor edits from the team on clarifications on the showcases yesterday. We also, I think, got a couple contract documents that are going to clear some of the exceptions. I think we had 3 out of our total procedures. I think we got 1 or 2 documents today. So we want to incorporate that and give you a final. If there's any feedback from you all on like, hey, we wish we could kind of break it down like this or that, we are more than happy to tweak and tailor. We know the data very well at this point, and I might be biased, but our creative services department is awesome. We will love to give you guys a product that you guys are really happy about obtaining. So what I want to do first is go through the methodology section. Do I have the clicker?
Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second to transition over to that.
Okay. And while he's doing that, I think what we're hoping for, we do a lot of work with state, local government, schools, and we're very big about transparency. So we're hoping that the procedures that we performed here, I think to kind of Tracy's point, will guide future efficiencies in terms of reporting it. And I think maybe kind of guide some of the way you report in the future. I do know from our first procedure, the reporting and transparency was a concern and ongoing topic that was discussed based off best practices. And we didn't do all the best practices that we would generally do, but when we completed our procedures, we had the Excel spreadsheet, which we could have given you guys thousands of pages of Excel and just said yes, but we wanted to go big for you guys and give you guys a product that was meaningful data that you could kind of dissect and break down in different ways. And we're hoping that the way we broke it down is meaningful and kind of helps with the transparency component. And if you have any recommendations on how to fine tune it for your purposes, just let us know. Okay, and I think we'll just go to the capital expenditure fiscal report. So I think what Jordan's showing there are the assumptions. We're going to update this based off kind of the new inputs that we received. In summary, contracts change orders under 50K were not included in the review procedures based off not necessarily needing a contract, but being able to just be issued via PO. MSAs, we had a list of certain MSA vendors that our understanding was they were master service agreements that didn't have contracts associated with it. And then finally, if you can zoom in. Are you able to zoom in? Yeah, and then just what we've noted before, the CPO 1.0 included both bond program and non-bond program figures. However, based off job number ID, which we note in here, you can kind of break it out. So it's under the district wide and the school specific project. So we have that data that you can easily kind of break down. So the table right there is basically our formula on how we reach the revenue, the commitments, and the expenditures. So revenues and expenditures we reconcile to the ACFR from the financial statements for the fiscal year 19 through 22. And then we use kind of the system reporting that was also the basis for that to get through the period of April 15, 2023. Same concept for the commitments. We used PeopleSoft and PMIS data with the facilities team. We wanted to confirm that they reconciled, and any instances where maybe the project management team knew of a contract that had not reached PeopleSoft, that we incorporated that into the commitment analysis. And with that, we'll kind of start going through some of the high level executive summary. So next page. All right. So at the highest level, the revenues through our period were the 855 million, commitments 781, expenditures total 711, and we have kind of the percent expended and percent committed. And how we break this down in the future schedules are, is it a school-wide project? Is it a school-specific project? Is it a district-wide project? Or is it one of the annual fiscal capital plan projects? So we basically listed each of the projects for those categories. We provided the funding source information for those categories. And there's only, I think, 90 pages for easy Sunday morning digestion over a cup of coffee. Very light reading. So if you want to scroll through, I just want to go through. I don't think we didn't need to touch on all of them per se. I think towards the end, I wouldn't mind going through kind of the overview of the schedule that was prepared by Brenna that kind of outlines how the different funding sources interact and how it's an easy way to kind of like zoom out and say, hey, how does this all fit together? I think it's, what's that? Yeah, I think it's like one of the this right here. So this one I think is a really helpful schedule. So thank you, Brenna, if you are watching this, for providing this. I think this is a great overview of kind of how everything fits in into the total capital improvement program. We wanted to be able to answer the question of what's remaining. And to do this, we needed to really zoom out and say, hey, what's the total capital program? What are the total revenues? Because you guys both used bond proceeds and non-bond proceeds for that consideration, which is great. On the next page, I believe we have our definitions. Yep. So this kind of guides some of the kind of various buckets that we've reported, and then our understanding of the buckets on how we reported it. And then I think with that, we can kind of just go up to like a showcase. We picked a couple showcases. Generally, if you had a lot of active projects and we were doing this for either master planning or quarterly performance reporting, we would kind of do the showcases for the major projects. We find that this information is really helpful. One, to kind of understand like, hey, where's this project specifically? If you just have the line item saying, hey, what's revenue commitment expenditure, it's hard to see if there's actual issues. We actually like seeing change order detail to say, hey, like, are there changes? What are the issues? And how can we early detect issues to mitigate risk? So we just kind of showed these, one, to highlight some really good projects that were being conducted by the school, and then two, just as a future reference and guide that if you are going to be reporting future bond programs, which hopefully you all have, that you have kind of a template to report the major projects or the projects of most interest to the community in a very transparent way. And then I think with that, we'll go up to maybe towards the top, we can do some of the subgroup categories just to understand the flow. So it all follows the same approach. We kind of say, what's the status? What's the quantity of status, which is consistent with the CAC report? And if you go next, and we'll break it down. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So so at first we went towards the very bottom just to kind of highlight the overview, definitions, and showcase. This should be like page 5 or 6. Oh, yeah, we zoomed up. So scroll back up. Yeah.
We went macro, now we're going down.
So I think maybe we put some of the bottom ones up for flow purposes.
That may be one suggestion. So
now you're on page 9.
9. Yep, this is perfect.
Yep, we're back up at 8 and 9.
Okay, page 8. So, yep. So this is kind of how we are detailing it, where we'll have specific schools project overview, and these are bond program projects, and we'll have the state that they're in, the quantity, and we list all the different projects. We're also going to deliver an Excel spreadsheet that has the actual project IDs that maps directly to the system of record, so that you could flow back and forth as much as you want. So this includes, I know it's very small on the screen, but this will include status in terms of like, is it done? Is it in bid? Is it in construction? It'll include commitments, expenditures, other expenditures, which is the admin and other charges to the program, and the remaining to be expended and remaining to be committed, as resulting in the percent complete. And I'll pause there for questions.
just make sure your mic's on there.
sorry. So I'll look at my favorite project, Alameda. So if I'm looking at Alameda, all in, total commitment was $32.8 million. And it has 2% left overall for final expenditures. Is that how I'm reading?
Correct. And that's through April 15 of this year.
Okay. And so it doesn't take us back to what we initially thought the price was going to be.
Correct.
It only tells us what the overall cost was going to be, or the overall cost was spent on that project.
Correct.
So if Alameda was X initially in the budget, it doesn't tell us what that is. That's what you told us last time, I think.
Correct. We didn't perform the original budget to the current amounts. I think I think those procedures could be performed, but I think based off my understanding from the original report, I think there would be a lot of assumptions needed to kind of fit into that category.
Because there may have been other things added that were not a part of the initial project.
Correct.
And I just want to add on to that. In addition, the things that were added may have been added due to unforeseen conditions like asbestos. They may also have been added because the school had been saving and had funds to contribute. Correct?
Correct.
So the cafeteria, I think, at Alameda is an example of this. So that's the other piece, is the multiple funding sources that Moss Adams has helped us understand better through this process.
Okay, and then with that, I mean, it's the same flow for each. We do school-specific, district-wide, the annual fiscal categories, list all the project statuses, and then the funding sources. We thought that this would be more helpful than a one-page Excel document with 5,000 rows. But yeah, if you have recommendations, being like, if you guys presented it this way, we would be more than happy to consider that.
When you're talking about the 5,000 rows, whatever, so if we were to ask you, so is that the total number of like purchase orders, contracts, change orders, all of the things that were reviewed? It's about 5,000 things.
The population was 5,000. When we back out our assumptions, I think we go to about 3,000.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think on our final assumptions, we'll detail those specifically. We'll make sure that it's very clear. Yep.
On slide 8, can you talk through just the top headers, and in particular, talk about project expenditures versus other expenditures?
Yes.
That would be helpful, I think, for the board to understand.
Yep. So project expenditures are those that specifically were related to the project. The other expenditures are highly related to admin charges that were incurred by Jeffco that were allocated to the specific projects.
And on a
I think that it would include personnel, that include the various other types of charges that supported the facilities department, et cetera.
And on a page like that, wait, let me go back to it. 8. So there's the remaining to expend, but that doesn't show us. It doesn't show us the percent committed, or that is the percent committed. Wait. Is that because that number 56 million, for example, on that slide?
That's commitments less total expenditures. Or that is commitments less. Yeah, it's what's left to be expended. So,
but it has or has not been committed.
It's been committed but not expended.
Okay. So is there anything that's left that's not been committed?
If we go to the summary page, I think there's about 71 million that's left to be.
Like, do we know from like on
74.
school specific projects? Do we know what percent of? Well, does that equal 0? Is there any percent, like, for example, on school-specific projects that is left to expend but not committed that we could see at this level, like school-specific? Or is it just the highest level?
The highest level for the revenue.
We can't see.
Yep.
It's not broken down.
Yep.
Okay.
So just for clarification, so is it an easier process? Did you want to walk further through, like walk through the document, or just open it? I mean, I want to make sure for board members and for how we're processing this that we're all seeing the same things and understanding what the content is. And because going back and forth in terms of like the questions we ask, it may feel very good to sort of disjointed. I wanted to say, what was the intention? Was it to walk through?
Yeah. So I think this is a lot to digest in a short amount of time, unless you had no plans this weekend. So I think this was the intent of like, hey, here's our final draft. We could have given just Excel, which I think would have been even more difficult to process some of these questions. So we are more than happy to set up another call individually as a group to answer any questions. If you guys gave us kind of those questions beforehand, we could prep it. We don't want to go final until you guys are happy with the product.
I have a suggestion. I think it could be helpful in the time that we have left for you to walk through the slide 5, which is the overview. Yep. Highest level overview. And then to go through the school specific, district wide, and other capital investments. Yep. If you could do those 4 pages, I think it could orient them to the document. And then, to Steve's point, you guys have just received this. We wanted to make sure that everything was accurate and as final draft as possible. And so thank you for doing that. But it is sort of hot off the press. And I think the board hasn't had a ton of time to process it. And it is a lot of information. So I think if you could go high level and then the different component parts, and I know there's a bunch of sort of spreadsheet information and project by project information in between, I think that would help orient the board to the actual big document. And so I'm going to pause for a second and just ask the board if that's a helpful suggestion or if you have other ideas.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. So we can just start at one point and then we can move.
Pause me at any time. We want this document that you guys understand it, and then it becomes kind of a useful tool for whatever the purposes are.
Can I ask one question though, Superintendent Farland?
Sure.
Questions, because I did not have time through this. If we do have questions, follow up, would we be able to?
Absolutely. So I guess my hot off the press comment is that this can be an opportunity for you to be oriented. Ask questions if you have them along the way, or write them down, and we are happy to get you guys more time with Steve, team, myself, Brenna, and we can continue to talk about this, especially as we head into November and we talk about the unallocated and prioritizing some of those funds. Okay. You're welcome.
Great. And then I'll just remind you, because I think there's been a lot of information provided on the first sheet. We basically explain the methodology for each of these components. So for the revenue, it's tied to the ACFR for the fiscal years under the period, plus any additional revenue inputs provided by the district. For commitments, that came from a combination of both PeopleSoft and then the PMIS, which is the facilities software system. And that's where we actually performed our reconciliation on the contracts and contract documents, with the exception of the exceptions that we laid out within our assumptions. The expenditures, same concept with the revenues, where we took PeopleSoft data, we reconciled to the ACFR for our fiscal periods under that were available to be tied to the ACFR, plus any of the PeopleSoft data, which was the same data source. From there, we provided remaining to be spent from a cash flow perspective, and a remaining to be commitment, which is what you have left to be incurred. So normally the commitment is a very important data point, because that's what what you can commit for future projects, or kind of figure out what to prioritize, et cetera. We've seen some programs where they overcommit, and then you're kind of in a bad situation. So you really want to understand revenue versus commitment, so that you are only executing projects and project scopes that you guys have the funds or future funds to execute on. And then if you go down, yep, I'll pause there.
Is your microphone? Oh, yeah.
When we started this project, and I think you said it today, so we're trying to get to a number of what we have left to spend. And is this right that you all are saying 74 million is the amount?
Correct. Through April 15th.
Right. I think this is really important. We've talked about it before because I think we might be aware that that's not what we have to spend. So to your point, we don't want to overcommit.
Right.
We actually, it's not very close to our number, right?
So that gives us a sort of as of April 15th, and then Brenna, and then it's like we know that that's what that is. So the expenditures and what's been committed between now and then. So yes, we do. It's just not
worried
in
about this being a public facing report. That like if I didn't know that sentence, I would look at this and go, "Oh, the district has 74 million left to spend."
Yeah.
That's not correct.
So let me go back to the benefit to the district point number 1, that this is giving us confidence in our current reporting. So if you look back at the October financials that were shared with the CAC, we can have confidence that what we're reporting there is fairly accurate. And these are moving targets. So some of what's remaining is dependent upon future board action on cap transfer and amounts that are decided upon. Project actuals versus budget and how much we expend versus not on certain things. Some projects go over, some projects go under. Investments in phase 2, which you guys have already talked about and sort of contemplated. But that might have been after April 15th. So, I can tell you that when we come back to you in November, we're going to share with you that we have, based on the fact that we now have confidence in our reporting, thanks to this process, about 20 million unallocated, which also contemplates that 2 new schools equal to about 60 million, about 30 million each, are also contemplated.
We should put a little asterisk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when we
Does that help, Danielle?
It's the public.
It took
And
me a moment.
when we come back to the board in November to talk about prioritization of the unallocated, we'll do some of that explanation from this report to where we are today.
And I think that's a perfect footnote for sure. So we can make sure that we incorporate that in how we normally, when we do these types of projects, we normally do the master planning exercise the once a year, plus the performance reporting against the master plan. And the master planning really is, what are your master plan scopes? What have you already committed to? What's remaining, and how do you prioritize that? And then if you don't have the money, where's the funding coming from? So we find that the master planning exercise in combination with this is a really good practice, because you're able to really finesse on every place we go, they want more than what they have. And I think the tough decisions, but the really good decisions you need to make in a transparent way, is how do you prioritize those scopes, and how do you do the governance and authority levels of those scopes, so that when you execute on it, then you track performance, and then it's very clear on what's next in line, what wasn't committed, and what kind of the governance process and procedures were to not go after those amounts. So I think this is a good tool of a snapshot, but I think kind of what you're describing is the master planning type exercise of where are we at, what's remaining, how do we prioritize, how do we make that decision.
Director Parker, did you have a question?
Sure do. When you talk about the master plan, is that something that we are going to be doing ourselves, or is that something that is additional?
So this program is sunsetting because we're in the 5th year of a 5-year program. So by this time next year, all projects that have been contemplated in the CIP, I'm looking at Jeff a little bit, will either have been expensed or in progress. And we need to begin talking about ongoing and future capital needs. And so Jeff has on his short to-do list a future capital plan. And it will include not only facilities improvements, but other long-term capital investments like IT, safety and security investments in our buildings, those kinds of things. And so Jeff's planning a cross-functional kind of project to create that future capital plan. And we do not plan to do that alone. We plan to get support from experts who do this work for organizations that own large amounts of real estate and need to maintain and support those investments over time. And so that's on Jeff's radar, and we will be doing some sort of procurement process for a consultant to support us through that. And I have strong interest in our board and our public citizens being involved in that process alongside our staff, led by Jeff and his team.
Okay. Thanks. And then a question, this slide here says remaining to be committed. Is that the same thing that you're speaking of as unallocated?
Tracy?
I'm going to ask you.
Okay, so remain committed, I think so. It's different terminology. That's revenues less what you've procured out, plus change orders. So through April, based off the documentation provided, we would have said that you have 74 remaining to be committed based off whatever the projects you guys decide to perform.
Okay. So the question is, we talk a lot about our priorities and things that we are planning to do. You talked about phase 2 and so forth. Does this slide include any RFPs that are out? Okay, so anything that we have already talked about, we want to do, they may be in an RFP process, or they're going to go out for RFP next month or something, they would all decrease this 74 million because we know that we're planning on spending it. Okay.
I do think there's a question here, though, about the terminology. And this has been a persistent challenge in what we call things and how that creates some confusion. So I don't know if this is based on industry standard, like that's where the language comes from. If this is to be used by us as a useful document, which is the goal, I think we just need to figure out how to align language. Not just for us sitting at this table, but we've used certain language from the dais and then talking to the public over the many years here. And I think it's a further sort of wedge for people to really understand what's transparent. What we're making transparent is a big effort, and I want it to be embraced as such and be able to be digested by everyone. So whatever, I don't know, I don't have a suggestion in terms of what it should be, but it needs to fit Jeffco and our needs. And so whatever those language pieces are, let's make that into the final.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good point was made. If you guys have approved project and project budget amounts, that it doesn't reflect here, but that could be an easy slide saying, okay, 74 or whatever the number is through current, less these board approvals gives you X.
Questions before we go further down?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand. The other expenditures are expenses that were incurred for the projects. Is that correct?
Yeah, district admin, all the,
Any owner's rep, any kind of stuff that was paid for?
if it was an owner rep if it was a professional service agreement for a project, that'd be project specific. If it was other, it'd be district allocation, which would include salary, all the associated costs with the salary cost.
Okay. And then to echo what you said, the remaining to be spent versus the remaining to be committed. We just need the clarification of the definition.
Yep, that's great.
Okay. And yeah, I'm sure I'll have more thoughts. But for right now, I'm okay.
Can you just really quickly share what your definition of remaining to be spent versus remaining to be committed means?
So remaining to be spent, depending if you earn interest on your proceeds, we'll see districts kind of manage cash a certain way. So that's just an indicator of like, okay, you've committed it and you've spent, I don't know, if you've committed 100 and you've spent 100, if you've committed 100 and you've spent 10, you have 90 to be spent. Yeah. So it's more of a cash flow tool on reconciling to the bank. Yeah, we can add definitions easily.
This isn't about this slide, but just generally, I think like an index or some kind of table that is pretty detailed rather than just like the high level table of contents.
Yeah.
So like we could know So I don't know if it's an index at the end or very
Definitions page.
not definitions, an index, a table of contents.
You to the sections.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
just
yeah,
at
absolutely.
the top, that just a master one, because you have a slide that says contents and it's got 5 things, but like I wouldn't know where to go to find the school,
Love it.
whatever. So
Table of contents, definitions. Aren't you so glad this isn't just an Excel spreadsheet? Yeah.
Great. Okay. So now we're going to the next layer, which is project expenditures, school specific projects.
Right. Page 8.
Page 8.
So here, the different categories, project specific or school specific, district wide, and then all the fiscal years. Those roll up to the top sheet. From there, we say project stage. I think this is similar reporting you receive now in terms of where we're at with all these projects. And we're just providing those definitions, same kind of KPIs that are reported above, but have kind of stage. And then really nice looking pie charts and bar charts.
what did you say, KPIs?
Key performance indicators.
And what are you referring to as KPIs?
Just what we're listing here, like commitments, expenditures, percent complete, percent committed. Just
Those are what you're referring to
yeah,
as the KPI.
yeah. Okay. Any questions on this one?
And then the slides that follow are the detail of individual projects against that roll up for school specific.
Yep. And this will tie to that page on stage, project, commitments, expenditures, etc. And then we have the same flow per grouping. So we are hoping with this information, you can slice and dice the information however you please.
So then the district-wide projects, similar format. If we're our imaginary index is page 21.
21. Can you go through this just kind of, it's the same format. So now that you're kind of oriented to the format.
So exact same. We'll have the quantity of projects, commitments, expenditures, other expenditures, commitments remaining. Very nice looking pie charts and bar charts, if you like those types of charts, with all the itemized backup right below it.
I have,
Dr. Parker?
what is an example of a district-wide project versus the school-based projects?
I would say maybe like an HVAC system that was going across all, and it would be determined as an indicator by the district. So they were able to determine the district-wide by a DW project identifier.
So some of the examples listed on the next page would be playgrounds, field improvements,
Yeah.
lighting, sprinklers, where it's happening at multiple locations. And so it's bundled together.
Yeah. And we do, the districts and organizations do combine some of these district-wide things together, because if you go out with a roofing RFP and it contemplates 20 buildings, you're probably going to get a better rate for the work than if you just said, well, now we're doing Bear Creek High School and they need a roof, and now we're doing Wheat Ridge High School and they need a roof, and now we're doing, Conifer and they need a roof. It doesn't make any sense to do it that way. It makes more sense to bucket some of the things that you're seeing on the detail.
Agreed.
Okay.
And then if we go further down, it's same concept, but we do by funding source.
That's page 24.
Yeah, so these are all kind of the fiscal year periods.
And so just so the board, and I'm going to say this, Steve, because I'm also checking my understanding. So if I say something incorrectly, please correct me. I don't have my friend Brenna here to look at and have her like smiling and going like this. So this is prior to the 2018 bond passing, we had a capital reserve fund. And these were projects contemplated in 16, 17, and 18 that were either in design, on closeout, in progress, completed, but not maybe fully encumbered or not started yet. And so that's what's listed here.
Yep. and I'll take it one layer deep. For some of those were committed before our period, but the expenditures hit it. So we really wanted to tie it to the financial statements for a completeness and accuracy standpoint so that you guys had all of it. So you'll see that these were out of our scope for reviewing the commitments, but we made it one-to-one so that it reconciled, so we weren't understating commitments.
So if it was committed in 2017, the project was committed, but we didn't have it funded yet.
Yep.
And we funded it then with bond proceeds or capital transfer in 2019. That's when you would have reconciled it? Did I ask the question correctly?
It didn't come out of the bond, right?
Okay.
Yeah. and
Everyone
then-
just make sure your microphones are on. I'm only saying this because it's a little bit less.
If that were the case, it sounds like, based on your reconciliation, that those projects came out of the previous cap transfers, which was at the time the capital reserve and all we had
Right.
prior to the 2018 bond proceeds being sold.
Okay.
Correct. And we have the funding sources, the same methodology with the funding sources that would answer that as well.
Okay.
So we do this for pre-bond and then 19, 20, 21, 22, et cetera. Same flow. And then the new reporting will come afterwards, which include kind of the funding source data set. So this will have by category, by project, expenditures, and where the funding's coming from.
That's page 38 for all of the following the bouncing ball here.
Yeah, because you go through the years.
So there's a lot of data here.
It's a lot. So I have a couple of just sort of higher level questions, and then we can feel free to continue going in this. And I can pretty much guarantee you we're going to be talking to you again because I know it's fun. As we
It's
have
our
a
job,
chance
so
to
talk about
to
our jobs.
digest. And it's nice because we really do. I mean, the intention here is to have this be part of an ongoing, transparency, one, continuous improvement, two, but also there's a lot of pride and work that's been done for our district around facilities. And there's been a lot of investment in a lot of communities. And I am happy to be able to show what it is, which is really nice with confidence. So, so you mentioned before that I think in the initial draft, there were 3 items that were missing. And now you said you've gotten 2 of those 3.
I was on a plane, but I saw an email come through saying, "Look what I found today." So we had 3 open. I'm assuming it's between 1 and 3. I haven't checked it, and we also have some comments from the facilities team on the showcases, making sure it's represented appropriately. So we're getting kind of those final inputs, and our goal is to get we'll get input from you all. We want your input, making sure you understand it. The footnotes are there to explain the program in a transparent and meaningful way. And then I think if we get those pretty quick, we can wrap up within a week or 2 from those inputs.
So my question then is, in work of this size, I mean, I'm sure this is not irregular for you all. Is that typical for reviews that you've done, that you have one thing missing or maybe up to 3? I don't know what was sent to you out of the 3,000 or whatever it is.
So we do a lot of reporting, and we do a lot of we generally sample when we do our projects. Like we in California, this is like why we do a lot of these projects, is in California for schools that get bond proceeds, there's a performance audit requirement where we go in similar to the procedures we perform for you all, where we sample expenditures and we sample vendor files. We have not been engaged to do a 100% review on a program before, and we probably do 10 to 15 of these types of projects per year. Getting to that little of documents outstanding is very good from our opinion, and I think from our experiences. We have gone to schools that will sample like 14 or 15, and I'm thinking of a couple in mind, and they're missing half of them. And these are like newer stuff, like newer projects or whatnot. So I think with those outstanding, I think a lot of them were from 2019, if my memory is serving me correctly. And I think from this exercise, we originally had a pretty big list of what was missing, and they had to go into the cabinets and find them. So I don't think the values are big in our assumptions report. I think you'll see it's not huge. It's good to have all, of course, but I think it's explainable from just a timing perspective and kind of a transition from a manual and kind of hard copy process and procedure to a digital process and procedure.
Because it seems like a small margin of what's, yeah. And so part of this is asking a question so I can congratulate our people. Because that's a lot of work, and to be able to identify and provide those things to you, it's a great level of reassurance that about their responsiveness. And so the next question I have is around, were there any discrepancies that you all found between financial data from various sources?
No, we were able to get explanations for any with documentation.
Okay, great. Thanks. And then one of the things sort of in the vein of continuous improvement. So based on, like, we talked about, this is like a moment in time that it stops. But given what you all have found, are there any changes that you would suggest the board request in reports from staff or in how we're receiving information based on what you've found?
Yeah, I have a couple, and we've talked, and I think Tracy hit on quite a few of them. I'll just go ground up. I think making sure folder structures are consistent. You have right access to people, just so it's easy to navigate. So I think that'd be easy. I think making sure you have your, hopefully you guys go for another bond program in the future, and you have the chart of accounts set up in a way, or thought out in a way that supports reporting and funding source consideration, just for like clear cutoffs. I think that'd be a great practice. I think just from my experiences with you all in the past, I think kind of and we do this for other programs, having that annual report where this is kind of like this is a reconciliation, but if you have the budgets established from the master planning process, then you can track performance. If you do that yearly, you say, hey, here's what we're going to plan you to commit, and you have all that transparency and prioritization set, and you have the updated budgets for the projects based off forecasts that are going, then you can really track projects. Because here you can't really say, oh, like, it's great that you delivered on the scope, but how did the project perform? Were there change orders? Were there design errors that we could have kind of resolved earlier? So I think maybe that more formalized master planning process with the clarity of what projects and scopes you're going to be doing first, with the prioritization schedule, so that it's very clear to the community, I think would have been super helpful. And then the quarterly or monthly performance reporting, so that you can figure out if a project's going over budget and what's causing it. So generally on the showcase file reports, if you have your big ones, you'll have change order reporting, where you'll list like what the change order is, what the amount is, what the root cause of it. And then I think from that granular level of detail, that might not be a board report, but I think having the data available to say, hey, we have change orders in excess of 10%. Like, why are we doing that? So I think that'd be helpful, just having that system down within policies and just procedures from that perspective. And I think I'm a construction auditor by trade, so I love doing construction audits. I think you guys have auditability within your contracts, making sure your cost of work definitions are very strong, so that when you do the audit on those projects, you can say, yes, we paid the contractor the fee that they were procured on, and nothing more. So I think kind of going one layer deeper, and contractor, we do about 100 construction audits per year. So, and we are employed, and like, we're growing so much because we have findings that are significant. And if you have those findings, and you can proactively work with contractors, you want to keep the relationship, of course, but you also want to make sure you're not paying them more than you should. And when you have those savings, or just those compliance type issues that you're able to not pay out, then you can reallocate that to the program. So I think that's a very useful tool, especially in the public environment, making with strong procurement process procedures, that you're able to ensure that projects aren't being overcharged, and the fee that they have agreed to be paid as all you're paying them.
Great, thanks. That's super helpful. And it sounds like it aligns well with some of the work already in process in terms of, line chart of accounts, the facilities master plan, so that as a board, we A, have confidence in numbers, and B, there is a more formal system for prioritizing what we need and how we get there. So I'll take a pause. Other questions for, Director Parker.
When you talked about the 3 exceptions, are those the same thing as the limitations that were listed in
Different.
that?
Different. So
They're
the
different.
assumptions were files that we didn't review based off MSA or thresholds, and then the exceptions is after we applied those filters, what vendors and projects did we not get source information to validate the commitment on?
But that is listed here as project limitations. There are 3 documents that said unavailable source documents.
Yeah, so that'd be a limitation for.
And those limitations listed are the exceptions that you were referring to.
Correct.
Again, terminology. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Second thing is the recommendations that you just listed. Can you write them down for us? Is that
Easy.
okay?
Yep.
And then the last thing is, what's the difference? This is a reconciliation. You mentioned performance audits in one of your explanations. What's the difference, or what would a performance audit do versus the reconciliation?
Yep. So this project was performed under AICPA consulting standards, and our and all that means is we define exactly what we're executing on. So here our tunnel vision focus was commitments. Are you able to provide the source backup to validate the commitments? When we do performance audits, and we do them across the nation, but California is kind of where we do a lot for schools. It's a auditing standard under government auditing standards. It's called GAGIS. And it's in California, they have an annual requirement that you validate expenditures equal ballot language. So that's the minimum requirement where we go in and saying, okay, you're incurring these invoices. And we performed these procedures for you all a couple of years ago. But it was a consulting report. Same procedures, just different standard applied. So the minimum requirement in California is you validate the projects and scopes equal ballot language agreed to. And then our focus is where we kind of niche is saying that's a very, you can comply and your program can be a total mess. So we work with an organization called KBOC, California Association of Bond Oversight Committee, where we're frequent. We do thought leadership articles, and we actually just presented to their annual oversight committee member, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, where we pitch, and there's an article that we wrote that best practices on other components and controls of a program to support it, because just reviewing bond expenditures against ballot language doesn't necessarily answer questions like, did you use the money effectively? So we apply master planning controls and say, hey, per GFOA, which is a general criteria that we apply of what does best practice for master planning look like? What are the controls? Who signs off on it? Then we make sure that you have the policies and procedures that are applied. Same with procurement, contract administration. For example, there's different contract types that can be used. If you're doing a design build with a lump sum contract and it's $50 million, you're probably paying more than you should. I'm speculating. So we'd recommend guarantee maximum price and kind of have those processes and policies formalized so that there's a playbook and there's a lot of transparency and accountability on if you're doing it, how are you doing it, and that serves as a very good training manual too. We'll also do reporting, okay, you did the master plan. How do you know you're tracking it? What are your change order controls? So we have a whole playbook and toolbox that we can apply, just either helping organizations kind of stay out of the common pitfalls we see, or worst case scenario, we come at the end saying what happened so we can prevent this at the future, which happens more often than I like to say. And then, or somewhere in between, hey, what's the health check? Where can we tighten up? We're 20% done. How can we make sure we're correcting anything or early detecting some of these issues? So, yeah, we're busy. It's fun.
Other questions for this moment in time? Please.
Sorry, on the district-wide expenditures, one of the line items, I think it's the largest one, just says district-wide site improvements. And I'm just wondering, do we know, that seems general, but it's also the largest line item?
I don't have that information. That'd probably be a facilities question.
We can look into that and get back to you. I'll just ask Jeff to take a note. Site improvements, yeah.
Everything else is very.
I'm sure we have some explanation of what falls into that category, and we just need to talk to our team. So we can do that and get that into your board update.
Yep, Director Miller.
So taking what you gave us 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? Yeah. Taking what you gave us 2 years ago with suggestions about, you need to do the following things. Some of them I know that are all already underway. Superintendent Dorland and Brenna have already started moving in those areas. If I don't know if we can tie or if it would be helpful to say where we come from, Tracy, like what we've done so far as a complement or as an appendix or something that just ties it all together in a nice bow, so that those, like you were saying, those procedures, those suggestions, all those things that you've been checking off along the way could be a part of, something at the end, so that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, so that if we go out for another bond, we've put those different procedures in place. We potentially do the annual performance audit. So we're, all those things that you've just listed, and Mary asked you to list again for other things that you discussed, I think would be helpful as something that we're able to reference back to, and the board would be able to go back to. Have we put these policies in place? Does Jeff have all of those things that he wants to have, in his check boxes, so that we can track the money? Because candidly, when we look at what we went out for, and the whole package was $700 and some million, and I look at $835 million, they don't match.
Yep.
And not that they should match, because we got premium money and we got interest earnings and those things, but it's dramatic. And I think it would be helpful to say we recognize that, and we're implementing already these following things, and we know what we need to do next time going out for, because it's a significant amount of money.
Yep, and we do that. We call it a control implementation list. So we'll say, what did we recommend? And then we will get management response. We have management responses on what they said they were going to do. And then we could describe what the control was and potentially do testing on whether that control was done, to say completed, taken steps, or no progress. So in California, that it's an implementation plan, and then it's a ongoing tracker of what you're doing. So if you look at some of our school districts there, that's one of the appendices, which is a performance audit requirement that you follow up every year on open issues and see where it's been done. Yeah. So yeah, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We can follow up. Jeff and I can. Yeah, and I think this whole interest in lessons learned and continuous improvement as we move forward with a future capital plan will be helpful. Thanks.
I just have one question about number symmetry here, just as an example. So tell me what I'm looking at. There's a number, let's say for Wheat Ridge High School, that's in the school-based projects, right? And so you can see the total. I just want to make sure I'm reading through it right, so that I can have more questions for you. So you have the subtotal for that school, 12.2, as of April 15th. And then on page 46, so that's in the school-based. Page 46, the funding source expended, kind of where it should be that, shouldn't the number, the total, be the same here, just divided over the different years, or no? Because the total on one is 12 point something million. The total on page 46 for the same school is, why can't I alphabetize in my head? I'm like wheat, WH.
It should tie.
It's 1.7.
It's a project and district-wide.
46 isn't district-wide. 46 is
schools.
Specific.
Okay. So
by funding source.
yep,
I just
expended
wanna-
by funding source. So it should be, if you tally all the funding sources and maybe we add a total section, it should reconcile to total expenditures.
Okay.
Doesn't?
Didn't look like it, but I could be reading it wrong. This is why I want to make sure that
Okay.
there's only amounts, the total is only in one, it's only represented in 1 year of spending. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm reading it correctly, because in this one, it's only the FF&E, right? The efficiency and future, out of whatever. Yeah, but shouldn't there be more somewhere? I just need to know where to find information and to trace it through. Yeah, so if
Got it.
someone maybe as a follow-up, we
Yeah.
can,
Can you say that job number again, or the job name?
Wheat Ridge High School.
Okay.
So what I was looking at is school-based budget, and then, or not base budget, but, and then on page 46, when it's going through each of the years of where it would be expended, those numbers are different. So I just want to make sure I'm reading it right, or if you can provide an explanation.
100%.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
And I think it might be a difference between commitment and expense.
Okay, good.
But I just want to put that bug in your ear.
Whatever it is, if you all could just give us an explanation.
What we'll
that'd
plan on
be great.
doing is we'll maybe coordinate with Brenna and Tracy on like a work session, or if you guys have questions, we can consolidate it and report back. And we won't go final till all questions and recommendations are implemented. We want this to be a product that we're all proud of. Yep.
Okay, awesome. Other questions that, because I realized that I started us late, so we're keeping you here a little late. But other questions that you all have at this moment for our Moss Adams friends?
Thank you for the heavy lift.
Yeah, and again, I mean, for your team, even though I know this is what you guys have take great joy in your lives in doing, is this work, so that's great. But to district staff and Superintendent Durham for your leadership, Brenna and her team, a lot of appreciation, because it's important for us as in our fiduciary responsibilities, and we want to make sure that this is setting us up for success as the district moving forward. So it's incredibly helpful to have, and we just want to make sure we all have the best information and we know how to read it. Would be great.
Yep, I totally agree. It was a big push on big lift on our side, and as well as your side. And everyone was great to work with. We really enjoyed the collaboration and the teamwork applied.
Great. And we'll look forward to having more conversations with you.
Great.
All right. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay. I have to close your meeting. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So that brings us to the end of today's agenda, and we're going to stand adjourned. Our next regularly scheduled meeting of the boards is 3:00 on November 1st here at the Ed Center. Thank you all so much for your work and your time today. Have a great night.